I think a lesson across all these questions, whether it's your market, whether it's your platform, whether it's your industry, is what you run into with such a big organization is it's so large that it moves slow.
10 or 15 years ago, I couldn't imagine myself without looking on a Google for certain things. A while after, I was doing all the same, just on YouTube. Nowadays, people are doing with ChatGPT. This provocates me to think that SEO might be completely dead. But wait a moment. When giants in the marketing industry, like Tony Robbins, Russell Brunson, are ready to invest and to pour the money into SEO God for his skills and expertise, it means that they know something what we don't. There is a reason for that, because those guys do not do anything without a reason. Damon Burton isn't just a marketer or a marketing strategist. He's a guy who is having a vision way better and clearer than most of us. In my personal opinion, is the god of SEO. Somebody who broke down a lot of beliefs which I had about SEO and they were completely wrong. And today when he sat down with me, we pulled out the curtain and see what worked, what have been changed, how have been changed, and what is the future. If you think that SEO might be dead, this conversation is exactly with you. It will prove you 100% wrong. My name is NGrS, this is the NGrS Show, and today with me, Damon Burton.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Good connecting, and we'll go over some fun things.
Yeah, we were discussing even before this episode about different platforms and the way how do they work, but let's just go a little bit backwards. I want to ask you before we even start how the SEO came to your path. Is this something you was
Mm.
always passionate about, or is this something what you just chose and said like, all right, I'm good in that, I'm gonna do it? How this happened?
Yeah, so there's a lot to that story. So I'll try to give you the middle length version. So it started. I mean, we could go way back. When I was a kid, I grew up lower middle class, and so I knew that I wouldn't have access to, computers and excuse me. I knew that I wouldn't have access to a lot of the technologies that were starting to come out. Computers are obvious for everybody nowadays, but back then they were kind of becoming commercialized. And so I would take advantage of little things like at school. And so I would take advantage of learning how to do typing classes at school. I'd learn how to do word processing at school. And then they came out with an HTML class. And so I learned all these little things along the way. And then what happened was when I was around 20, I started to build a car enthusiast website. So back then I was big into cars, and this website took off, and I started to get several thousand active members in this little community. And so that's when I started to pay attention to it more. And I thought, how do I make this better? And so that's when I learned more about web design. How do I monetize this? That's when I started to learn more about marketing. And so everything was self-taught. And then I started to pick up some clients on the side, eventually got a job. And then I worked remote. So I worked at home for a company in Las Vegas. Fast forward, and this Las Vegas company got raided by the ATF and the FTC and the sheriff's office and got shut down. So all of a sudden, I was quickly without a job, and I had to decide if I would go find a new job or bet on myself. And so I took a bet on myself, and I started supporting some of those side clients. They were mostly design clients, and the way that I got into SEO was one of those design clients said, "What do you know about Google?" And I think this is a really great thing for newer entrepreneurs is, I knew enough that I felt like I could help them, but I didn't know enough that I could confidently charge them. And so I didn't want to take their money if I couldn't deliver a
Mhm.
return. So what I negotiated was, how about, but I won't charge you anything until we hit these goals. And if we hit these goals, you owe me retroactively and we start a retainer. And so I was able to hit these goals, do an SEO within a couple months, and I enjoyed the process. And so then I took it to a second design client, did the same kind of negotiation, had similar success. And at that point, I always knew very early on that I didn't want to be an agency that did everything. And so I thought, well, let's see if SEO is the thing that I focus on. And so I chose to focus on SEO for a minute and continued to have good success, enjoyed the process. And then I decided this is my thing. And 18 years later, it's still my thing.
Awesome. But one thing which you now said is something what most of the people are not willing to do. And this is, I'm confident in what I'm doing. I'm going to do it for free. But if we succeed, you owe me retroactively and you pay me the revenue. Where this courage comes
Mhm.
from? you was that sure in your skills, or this was the easy resistance of getting clients which are resourceful and with whom you can really deliver the results?
I don't think it was either of those. I think it was just morals. I
Hmm.
knew that I wanted to help them, but I didn't feel like I could, you know, give them any sort of guarantee. And so it was, well, how do I then negotiate that? Because the variables are now, I want to help them. I can probably deliver some sort of support, but I can't equate that the level of success to a dollar amount yet. And so how do I figure that out? So, being able to negotiate a deal where it's like I'm incentivized, they're incentivized, they have nothing to lose, but I still have an opportunity to gain if I perform. So really it was just a moral decision of
Mhm.
I want to figure out a way to help these people without feeling like I'm taking their money and I don't fully know what I'm doing. And so, I now teach people SEO as well. And this is like one of the things that I've explained to a lot of the students, and a lot of them have offered similar arrangements. And it's worked really well because like if you think about when you engage with somebody, especially nowadays, and especially marketers, there's resistance and people are concerned about, can I trust this person? And so if you are willing to support somebody and you take the risk, then now all of a sudden you establish trust. And the other thing that's important for entrepreneurs to understand is like when you're transparent, most people want to help you. And so if
Mhm.
you just come to a negotiation and say, I'm new, or I want to, I want to grow, or I want to test thing, that then more people are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt if you're just transparent with them. So really, it was just a moral play.
That's very powerful because you were not having any ego in this moment and you were just going all with your heart. And not many people are doing that, let's be very honest, because I'm seeing also sometimes people who just start doing some business and they immediately position themselves as a high ticket closer, high ticket seller, and they're not willing to do any work under any negotiations without getting paid. This is this is really getting admire from my side and definitely respect. But I want to ask you one thing now. Back when you were starting, there probably was many people who were doing or believing that they're good in SEO. What was your driving force? Those were results, those were clients in that moment who were telling you that this really works for them. How did you measure all your results so that come to this point of working with the best marketing names in the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it kind of combines what the previous topic we were talking about is. So, we do a few million dollars a year, and we don't, for being a marketing company, we don't do any marketing. Like we've never run any paid ads. We don't have an email list, and it's just been built off results and reputation. And so, to your point of a lot of other people are not willing to take on clients or start to build an agency or a business without charging, high ticket. I'm not saying that's wrong, but what can happen is, there's a value exchange. And so if you start by charging a high price and you don't deliver the results that equate to a high price, then you build a bad reputation. And
Mm,
so what do you want? Do you want short-term money quickly and then long-term failure and bad reputation? Or do you want, slower money in the beginning, but you build a good reputation that then becomes sustainable and long surviving, right? So I was always okay with delayed gratification. And I didn't realize a lot of these things until retrospect. Really, in the beginning, it was just a judgment call of, how do I serve these people at a fair value? And so when I first started, it was, the free deal, and then if we hit these goals, then you pay retroactively. And then when I started to establish enough processes and SOPs, and repeatable deliverables, then it was okay. Now we can start to assign a price with this, and it started really low. It was like $300 a month. And then every time I wanted to increase prices, of course we all want to increase prices, but are you increasing it just for the sake of increasing it, or can you also increase the value to equate with it?
yeah.
And so it went from every time I wanted to increase, it was like, well, am I good enough now? And can I deliver more results for that value? And so it went from $300 a month to $750 a month, and then it was $750 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, 15 to 1,950, 1,950 to 2,500, 2,500 to 3,000, and then it just like slowly increased over the years as I felt more confident that would the person on the other side believe that was a fair value? And so by always being considerate of the value you deliver, then if you exceed that, then you build up a good reputation. And so all these, you mentioned some of the cool people that I get the chance to work with. Like a lot of those people, like you can't run an ad to get in front of that level of people to get them to start
Oh
working
yeah.
with you. Like you're not going there's nearly nothing you could do to get in front of those types of people and convince them to even take a phone call. And so what happened was the opposite. Those people approached me. And so this was all based on building up a reputation. And so there definitely, I was asked at a mastermind a couple of years ago when I was speaking, somebody said, "Well, what took you so long?" And what they were asking is, what took so long to get to a certain financial level of success? And it was that delayed gratification. Do you want to turn and burn? And sure, there's many ways you could be more successful financially faster than I was, but is it as sustainable?
Yeah, that's very powerful. And you're actually very right. And it opens up another question in my head right now, saying that such a high people you cannot attract by paid ad or by cold call, sending them email, because this is not the way where you can build a trust. And this is probably the foundation of them deciding would they work with you or not. So for the very beginning of opening that sake of questions, can you tell me how it looks working with such a high people, such a high clients, different than with clients before you had? Is there any major differences in the responsibilities, in the way of deliverabilities, and in the way how you approach the work?
Not so much in how we approach the work because we have a good product with good processes, and so we deliver the same level of service to any client, right? And so we're not going to. It doesn't make sense to treatment, right? Like you either deliver a good product or you don't. So there's not so much a big difference in, there's certainly a difference in the volume and the competition that we deal with. But at the end of the day, it's a solid product that we deliver to all clients. Now, the other part of your question is, are the clients different? And there is a difference in certain types of clients. I think we're all kind of familiar with the cheaper the client, the more demanding and needy they are.
Yeah.
And so you run into that in any market. But what's interesting is, I've had different evolutions of the types of clients that we um, prefer to deal with over the years. And so, the lower budget clients is kind of self-explanatory what kind of comes with that. But then what's interesting is a lot of the clients that we deal with are, I've started to turn down certain types of clients. And so some of the clients we turn down are like the billion-dollar
Mm.
companies. And what you run into with such a big organization is it's so large that it moves slow. Like if we need them to approve an asset, then it has to go through this manager who has to get approval from their manager, who has to get approval from their legal team. And so then it becomes such a slow campaign that it makes it hard to create the momentum that you're used to. Now, another thing that I've realized lately is marketers are really bad clients.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
you know, eh,
Tell
because
me about that.
marketers like the marketers that are in, like very active and claim to be the seven-figure earners and things like that. Um, there becomes a lot of ego tied up with marketers because they're marketers, right? And they're good at what they do, but because they're used to being in, SEO is very different. The majority of other types of marketing is very different than paid ads. It's very different than emails. And so with all these other types of marketing, there's a lot quicker movement, right? And so you can set up a paid ad account in a day and start running ads. It doesn't mean you profit in a day. You usually have to burn money for a couple of weeks and start to get the pixel line and things like that. But you see movement quickly. With SEO, you don't see movement for months. And no matter how many times you explain that, like we're really good at setting expectations. And so when we have a lead call, we explain SEO is slow. When we send them
Mm.
the proposal, there's a full page that says reasons not to hire us. And in it, again, it says SEO is slow. Then in the agreement, it says SEO is slow. When they sign in the welcome email, it says SEO is slow.
It's a pre-framed.
Then we send them a fit. Yeah. And so we also send them a physically printed welcome kit that also says SEO slow. So there's at least 5 times that we explain SEO slow. And we explain why. A lot of people, where a lot of other SEOs fail to communicate is, I think it's pretty common knowledge that SEO is slow, but they don't explain why. And so it's a difference. The concept is a difference between uh, profit, monetization and progress. And so when we look at progress, you can see progress pretty quickly. You can go from, we'll say, page 10 on Google to page 5, and then page 5 to page 3. But all the traffic is on page 1, so you don't monetize it until it gets all the way to page 1. And so that's the difference is progress versus monetization and why it takes time. But when you talk to marketers, I remember one conversation in particular. There was a successful, entrepreneur, and we get done having this hour-long conversation. He's asking me all these great questions, and I'm explaining why SEO takes time. And he goes, "Cool, let's do it. I'll try anything for 30 days." And we just spent an hour explaining, this is like a 9 to 12 month thing at a minimum. And so, marketers are funny, and so
Yeah.
that's something I've been paying attention to lately because they they don't understand this delayed gratification that we talked about. They don't understand the difference between interrupting somebody with a paid ad versus earning their trust through organic, right? And so, yeah, there's lots of different types of personalities that you engage with, and some are better or worse in how they support and cooperate in the success of the campaign.
Yeah, actually, you're slow, it's not their slow. So this is the biggest mismatch probably with marketers when you start to work. But uh, I want to ask you now, what would you say is the most underrated skill that entrepreneur needs to success in digital marketing today? Is it
But
that people are underrating SEO, or is it something else?
well, I think that's probably two different questions.
Hmm.
Do a lot of people underrate SEO? Probably. The spotlight on SEO has been interesting over the years because I've been in it for so long that when I first did 18 years ago, I didn't realize how new it was because I just kind of transitioned into it and I was kind of an online person. But then in retrospect, I realized that I started in the infancy of SEO. And so it had some attention. And then, paid ads comes along. And then if it's this pendulum, then all of a sudden the attention starts to swing the other way. But SEO never went away. I mean, every year we continue to grow, yet the mainstream attention has focused more towards paid ads. And so now I see some of the attention swinging back the other way because people are getting tired of paid ads. They work, but they're frustrating. They work, but they're exhausting. Um, they work, but there's a bunch of politics and compliance and, all these advantages and disadvantages. And those advantages and disadvantages are the opposite of SEO. And so now when they start to be frustrated with, people say that algorithms change all the time, which is technically true, but that doesn't mean you change your SEO strategy all the time. And so like a lot of people will say, well, you probably have to shift your strategy all the time. Not really if you know how to do it properly. But then I think about paid ads and I see, all the paid ads people monitoring their account every day, A/B
Mhm.
testing their ads every day. Like they're
Yep.
in there way more than I am in an SEO campaign. So yeah, there's probably a lot of misunderstanding with SEO. Your other question was, what's the thing that probably takes to be successful in entrepreneurship? And it's probably what we basically been talking about is patience. I think two things come to mind. One is patience, and two is flexibility, like giving yourself the freedom to make mistakes or
Mhm.
to try different things because social media is such a highlight reel of success. I think people assume that success should be easy or they see people, have big wins, but that big win that they talk about probably took 10 years to build up to.
Yep.
And so not feeling obligated to have a win tomorrow will relieve a lot of stress, and relieving a lot of that stress will probably make you have a win faster.
In my mind, looking at all these wins on the social media, sometimes they even make pressure on me, thinking like, am I too late? I'm 34. am I already late because I see younger bodies who are able to make it higher than me and bigger than me? And then sometimes I'm looking like, what's the reason behind that? And probably it's just about the time when will happen, like you said. But I want to ask you another thing. For me, as somebody who don't very well understand SEO, I'm not in that niche. I'm not close to this business understanding on the level like you do. And I believe a lot of our listeners, I want to ask you, is it SEO something like a principle which doesn't change, even though if tactics or trends in the marketing space shift or change completely their direction?
Yeah, you're probably the first person that's ever understood that properly. So the
Thank you.
problem with other SEOs and marketer stereotypes is the algorithm thing, right? That algorithms change all the time. So while that is true, Google probably changes the algorithm a couple times, a week or a month, but they're small changes. And then they have major changes maybe every quarter. But if you focus on the fundamentals, which there's three of them, so the first is your site structure. And it's really
Mhm.
like conceptually, it's easy things. There's thousands of small things underneath these three things, but really it's three fundamentals. And so the first thing is like, how good or bad is your website built? Does it
Mhm.
load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Is clear call to action, easy navigation, good user experience? The second thing is content. You can only show up on search engines for what Google can read. So do you have clear value propositions? Do you communicate your expertise? Do you solve problems? And the third category is external credibility. Brand and reputation, reviews. Do other people talk about you? Do they link to your website? And so most of your visibility comes from the latter two, that content credibility, but it's only going to be effective if you have a solid foundation. So what I mean
Mhm.
is you can have really great content reputation, but if your website is painful to navigate and not mobile friendly and it's slow, Google's not going to send a visitor there because then it would make them look bad by recommending it. So over these 18 years, we have all these algorithm changes, and every time a new algorithm comes out, our clients are either neutral or up. We've never had a client get a penalty. And every time
Mhm.
these algorithms come out, everybody else gets crushed because they're trying to like manipulate and cut corners instead of just focus on the fundamentals.
Are those changing in algorithm which Google does and all other social medias? Is it at the end like a compound effect, like a compound stake of changes which dramatically influence on the end result, or are those changes up and down?
It's up and down. I mean, all the algorithm changes so far have fallen under those three categories. And any that you can think about should fall under those three categories. It might change in the future, but some changes, years ago, there's been a couple big algorithms based around content, right? So probably two core ones come to mind. There was one in 2012 that focused on low quality content. So you used to have these tools, they're still out there, but people don't use them as much, called content spinners. And so people would like steal content from Wikipedia or their competitors and put it
Hmm.
in these tools and it would rotate the paragraphs and synonyms. Well, now we have a new version of that with AI. And so people are just mass producing low quality content on AI. And so now Google's come out with major algorithms around that. So some of them have major shifts, like, they affect 20 to 40% of the results.
Wow.
And that's huge. Other algorithm, like usually a major algorithm shift is like 1 to 3%. And so these 20 to 40% ones are massive, but most of the algorithm changes are a tenth of a percent on the impact on the result variations. So yeah, some are big, some are small.
What is the reason for such a big search engines or social media platforms to change the algorithm? Do they see the value with different perspective than us who are using those platforms, or they have some different reason for that? What's the main reason of changing it?
I don't know about social media. That's not my area of expertise. But on search engines, it's primarily two things. One is user experience, and two is revenue. I mean, these are
Hmm.
big businesses, and so they always make user experience changes that can increase their revenue. But their revenue is also influenced by user and adoption. And so anytime there's an impact on that, like the AI thing right now, like they're probably trying to pay more attention to that because the more people that produce low quality AI results, and if they don't address that in the results in the algorithms, then the results are going to become less qualified. And so the less qualified the results, the less people are going to use Google. And so really they're always trying to protect the user experience and the user base.
Mhm. And when it comes to search engines and the changes which you are making with your clients according to the certain changes happen in the algorithm, are those changes happening in the messaging and the way you speak to people, or in the form or type of the content you're providing?
Well, for me, it's never really changed because it's always been about value first. So as long as you try to solve the customer's problem and put the answer first, kind of like we talked about relationships, if you do that from the
Mhm.
SEO perspective and try to help the end user, then Google generally positions those higher.
Cool. I want to ask you something different now. You wrote a book on SEO called Outrank. What was the inspiration behind that book? You wanted to help people, to inspire them, to bring more awareness on SEO. How it happened?
But part of it was the inaccurate information that was online. And so I
Mm,
wanted the ability to help people not fall into the trap of the inaccurate information. And then I also wanted to help people. So if people couldn't align on the budget and we couldn't help them, if they were willing to put in the time, I wanted to give them a resource.
so it's pretty much like do it yourself with help of the book. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
then my question to you is, uh, once you publish that book, as you said, like it was ethical reason for doing it because you wanted to break down the myths. What are the most common myths and misconceptions in the SEO industry?
Oh, it's evolved over the years. I mean, it's always been like, how do we cut corners? Now
Mhm.
it's mostly around AI. So I've kind of taken a stance. AI is great, right? And so I don't have to explain the value in using AI, but I've taken a stance on content output, about minimizing content output because, you know, there's a big gap in how you communicate through your content. So you can only show up on Google for what Google can read. So when you publish this content, do you clearly communicate your value propositions and how you can solve problems? AI can help you do that. But where AI fails is that human connection. And so when we were talking before we hit record about social media, people might follow you for your business expertise on social media, but they usually convert when they relate to you as a human. And so it's the
Yeah,
same thing in content, right? And so if you think about paid ads versus SEO, paid ads, you're interrupting somebody. And so you usually show them the value propositions and you try and convert them as quickly as possible. But on organic, people they initiated it. They sought to answer a question, solve a problem. And so they're looking for a little bit of insight, of trust, of authority. And so that's a different way you frame your landing page and your content. So everybody understands the value, like content is important, but too many people are focusing on quantity instead of quality. And, one example that I always generalize with AI is AI does know what it feels like to have your heart broken. And so like those little emotional things are the stories that you can share. And so another example is we have a client that sells baked goods, right? And so AI doesn't know that childhood memory of going to your grandma's on the holidays and walking in
yeah.
and smelling the aromas of the family get together. And those little differences in personal storytelling opportunities are ultimately what get people to trust your brand or you as an entrepreneur. So the approach in how you focus on content, right, is a big thing that people miss.
Yeah, and there is a lot of dust right now that AI will take over that, AI will take over this, humans will stay behind. Hey, you, this isn't for you if you want to get just better at sales. This is for people who want to truly dominate it. Either it's DMs, calls, webinars, keynote speaking presentations, or any other form, Instagram or Facebook stories as well. The game has changed. AI, it's just around the corner. So if you're relying on old sales scripts, old sales pitches, or if you're relying to learn sales from the old books written even 2 or 3 years ago, to not even speak about 10 or 20 or 30 years ago bestsellers, you're losing the game. Your sales will not perform on the best way. See, this is why I created this community. To give you unfair sales advantage in every format, every tool, for every buyer. Cold DMs, sales calls, sales pitches, understanding the sales pitches, breaking down sales objection, and everything else what you need to understand when it comes to different tonalities and sales psychology so that you understand how to better perform your sales. This isn't another Slack, WhatsApp, or Telegram group. This is a community of people who want to become not just better at sales, sales dominators. It's free, and you can join it just by clicking the link below in the description of this video. My question to you is, besides storytelling and this personal touch, do you see some other aspects of AI leaving to us humans? What will stay to us besides the storytelling and besides this human connection touch?
Say that again. AI and what to humans?
What will stay to us humans where the AI cannot
Mm.
change us when it comes to all those stuffs on social media and of SEO and building funnels and everything else?
Well, the technology will continue to become more and more amazing. So on the technical side, that opportunity will just continue to become more seamless. Um, it's really just the difference of the personality touch. And so what's interesting is that there's a phrase I heard, I can't remember who said it, but they called it brain buffering. And and you're starting to see people adopt AI so heavily that they forget how to do critical thinking on their own. And so you see people make posts or in personal engagements where I don't think even they know who they are anymore because
Yeah.
they've leaned so heavily into AI. So it's almost like the same thing where we're talking about paid ads versus SEO. So then we can go AI versus, less or no AI. So paid ads is quick, but you don't necessarily own the assets. And it's the same thing with AI. AI is cool. It can teach you things quickly. It can give you answers quickly, but it reduces the effectiveness. Like if you fully, you can use it as a crutch, and then it
Mm.
becomes a handicap. So I think people should be sensitive. Nobody needs to be explained to like all the upside and the potential and the opportunity with AI, but I think people don't pause for a moment and think about how they can balance it to maintain their own integrity and personality and critical thinking.
Love it. When it comes to critical thinking, you have been able to scale your business to work with some high clients. We're talking about best of the best in the world at the moment. What is the toughest lesson you had to learn along the way working with them?
I don't know if that it was a tough lesson, but it was a good lesson, and it was, how to compress communication. And what helped me is leveling up with them, right? And
When you
so,
when you say compress, you mean
or
to shorten or you mean to make it more certain?
yeah, both, right? So
Both.
like in the clarity and the length or time. And so, a lot of these people that once you start to deliver success and you get invited into these networks, then you there's a transfer of trust and authority, and so you get other referrals of other great people. And what's interesting is compressing these communications. And so when I get these referrals and it's, hey, Damon, here's this other amazing person, what I might send in a 10-minute video to somebody else explaining the SEO strategy now becomes a 90-second video
Wow.
because these people have so many other things they're doing. And it's not that they don't care about SEO, but what I've realized, and even myself, is when people send me, Loom videos or messages, my interest dramatically shifts just by looking at the timestamp. And so if somebody sends me an audio note or a Loom video and I see it's like more than 5 minutes, it's instantly a turnoff, or
Yeah.
it becomes a deferred task. And so it's like, look at so and so's video later. And so now they missed the opportunity to convert me or to get the reply quickly. And these other people that we work with are infinitely more busy than I am. And so catching that even with myself or amplifying that understanding through my own experience is a big learning lesson. And so, everybody's busy, like no matter at what level of success you are. But when you meet these people that are super successful, then just get right to the point. Like half the time you don't even need to give context, you don't need to give background. It's just, here's the issue or here's the opportunity and here's the path. Like the end. Just cut out all the fluffy stuff.
It's very interesting because I always say in sales that the value it's always in the eyes of the prospect, and if they don't see it valuable, you can have the best possible product, but if you don't know to present the value on the way how they read and perceive the value, you end up with no sales. But
Yeah.
one thing which you mentioned before is that SEO is slow. Then give me a context of how does it look a result measuring, and how do you know
Mhm.
that you're not mistaken over the period of time? How do you know that you're on the right path? Considering that, let's say we have 12 months of a time span to be see high results, how these results are showing gradually along these 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So to avoid wrong trajectory, you spend a lot of time in the beginning. And so when we onboard an account, the first 4 weeks is there's some fixes on the website structure, but while that's going on, we have a team that's dedicated just to data analysis and research. And so our goal is to go, okay, what's the quickest path to monetization and the prologue with the client's product or service with what audience? So our goal is to eliminate all the distractions and identify the clear path. And so we might not, one thing to break often with clients is we have to break a mindset of targeting everything. You don't want to
Mhm.
target everything. You want to target the things that are either the most profitable and or the most sustainable long term because to your point, this takes time. So we do not want to target everything because there might be some products or services that have a shorter shelf life. And so if we need 12 months and then 12 months later we get that ranking, but now you no longer focus on that product or it's a different time of the year if you have a seasonal product, then you've wasted a lot of that time and resources. And so our goal is to identify what products or services can you sell for a longer length of time and for a higher volume or profit margin. So you want to do that all in the beginning because what you're basically saying is, how do you avoid mistakes? And the only way to do that is by front loading that strategy. Now, um, how you show progress is because we talked about the difference of progress versus monetization and all the profit is on page one. In the beginning, you can only show, your KPIs are going to be rankings and movements on Google. So you benchmark where the website is currently at. So in this first month, you figure out, here's all the money for Nick's campaign. These are the things that we can monetize. Where does Nick's website currently stand? And then that way, each month after that, you can benchmark it again and run a new report. And so then you can see, all right, in month one, we're on page 10 of Google. On month two, we're on page seven. On month, five, we're on page four. And so in the beginning, you
Mm,
measure it based on those positions moving because you can't measure traffic because
yeah.
you won't have any traffic until page one. You could jump from page 10 to page three, which is massive, but there's so little traffic past page one that you can't measure anything other than the position moving.
Am I getting it right that as foundation it's more solid, as structure of the everything you build around gonna be more solid in that case? Because to me it looks that front work is the most important part of SEO.
It's the core part, yeah. I mean, because everything else will be diluted if you don't do it. So all of them work together. You can't have the later progress without good content, but you can't have that momentum without a structure for it to sit on top of.
Very interesting because tell me right now, uh, does foundation dramatically depends from how big client is and how good their brand is? Because it's one thing when you onboard me and completely another when you onboard Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah, there is a difference, but it's not so much the brand, the size of the website, the amount of content, and what platform it's built on will make a big difference on the structure. Now, the opportunity and how quickly to drive a return on investment that can be influenced by the brand. So the fastest websites that we can help monetize have existing content and existing brand, but a poor structure. Because
Mm,
then when we come in and we fix the structure, it instantly amplifies what's already there. It's just been diluted and now it gets corrected and amplifies it. So there is advantages if you have a brand and historical content. Now with like a newer campaign on a website without historical content, then you still do the same things. You still fix the structure either way, but we might not have content that it amplifies. And so that's the difference in time to ROI because now you have to build and acquire content for the search engines to associate with the products and services and the queries. So you take the same approach, just the time and ROI can significantly be influenced, or you can have a quicker return if you have existing content to leverage.
Hmm. You didn't tell me what are the biggest mistakes when it comes to SEO in the businesses? How do they make those mistakes and how can they avoid it?
By not listening to most SEOs. So, the one of the best ways to optimize your content is to not optimize your content, because the problem with a lot of SEOs is they try to over manipulate the content, and so now it becomes content purely for the purpose of SEO instead of for the
Mm-hmm.
end user. The other thing is, we got an example right now with a client that's been with us for probably 7, 8 years. Um, and a younger agency got in their ear, said some, sexy words in their ear, and so we've been kind of supporting this client and saying, they came and asked us questions and said this other agency has these other recommendations. And so we looked at these recommendations and they were all either already done
Mm.
or a really bad idea. And so a lot of times we get people come in and know how to talk smoothly, and they know how to sell, right? But they're not the ones actually doing the work. And so sometimes there's a panic over an issue that doesn't even exist, just because somebody else is used to, there's some mysticism about SEO. And so it creates this opportunity for the bad guys to come in and just kind of say whatever. And then it creates a panic. And then, oh, I need to fix my SEO, even though nothing's wrong. So that's one thing. Now, another thing for the same type of scenario is in any industry, there's kind of bad guys or people that just put profit over people. And with this same client, where we've been working on it for 7, 8 years, they have over 100 page one rankings. They have a pure monopoly on all their results. There is little to do to make them show up higher or for more words. But there's been a shift in their market. And so, though they are number one on everything, because of the seasonality and other factors, less people are searching it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So SEO is doing its part in putting them at the top of the search rankings for all their targets, but the attention of the market isn't there right now. And so these other people come in and say, well, let's do all these other things. Well, doing these other things, how is that going to move anything higher? SEO isn't the problem, the market is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so we opted out of the agreement because the other agency is going to create it. And we've seen this plenty of times over the years. We had one other client a couple of years ago where we worked for 5 years, got their traffic up to 20,000 visitors a day. And then a new agency came in and said, we got all these great ideas, let's change everything. And I said, you're going to lose all of your SEO. And the new guys said some smooth words. We opted out of the agreement because it was going to crash and burn. 2 weeks later, they made all the changes and lost 5 years of SEO in 36 hours.
Wow.
Now, this other client is walking into the same scenario. They're already number one on everything. There's nothing more they can do. The market is just shifting and it's not on search engines as much for this particular industry. So these guys want to change all these things, but changing all the things doesn't move the market, and you're already number one on everything, and they're going to do similar strategies that other client example gave. And so they're going to crash and burn. So, you know, be sensitive to, because SEO is a long-term play. You said, it takes time to identify, you don't want misalignment on the trajectory. Dramatic
Mm-hmm.
shifts can have dramatic negative impact. So that's probably one thing is, make sure you do your due diligence on the agencies that you engage with and make sure you understand the context of the strategy.
Wow, that's powerful because most of the time people really misunderstood the context of the strategy and they just go with shiny object syndrome just to do the change because they desperately want some better result or better performing. But in your industry, like in any other, trends are come and go. And my question to you is, what's your process of adapting to those trends? Do you adapt? Do you dramatically exclude them? How you deal with such stuffs?
For the most part, we do the opposite. I think that's what's provided longevity and continued success is by focusing on those principles of SEO, those three fundamentals we talked about. The majority of other agencies, they get caught up in the trends or what's new loopholes that we can manipulate. And so you might have short-term success with that, but you don't have long-term sustainable success. So we've always avoided what are the latest hacks to shortcut SEO success? Because, yeah, it might work for a minute, but I don't want the client success for a minute. I want the client success for years. So we've just always focused on the fundamentals, and I largely ignore what the market does. I don't follow other SEOs. I don't go to a lot of SEO specific conferences because you go to enough and it's just repetition. It's, one person repeating a thing they heard from another person who's repeating a thing that they heard from another person. So instead, I've just
Mhm.
chosen to identify what works and what doesn't work through our own processes.
That's very smart. That's very smart strategy because once you focus yourself on the things which truly work, you're certain in them and you don't have to even have self-doubt in yourself. But I want to ask you, was there any difficulties in your career or difficulties because of the clients you onboard and how you overcome them and how it looked this period?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while, so ideally you have filters for yourself. So which clients are good or bad, which types of industries you can drive success, and which ones are a little bit harder. And ultimately, you want to only take on clients that are a good personality alignment and in an industry that you feel like you can deliver results. So we've kind of modified that over the years. Which industries we have a higher probability of success. And then as far as I, because I've always been okay with delayed gratification and identifying processes on our own, there's not been massive, significant losses over the years or big, scary events. Probably the two things come to mind is I would have documented processes quicker. Uh, I think we all kind of understand the concept of the importance of documenting processes, but until you actually do it, it's a big difference in thinking about processes and actually integrating scalable processes. So your ability to scale and maintain quality control is going to be dependent on how good or bad your processes are. And so
Mhm.
you want a business that's dependent on processes, not people, because if it's dependent on people, then your results are as good or as bad as the person in that role. And if that person
Mhm.
leaves, then your processes change. And so you want your processes established so that no matter who has that role, they're always consistent. Probably the biggest learning lesson we had was just about a year ago, which was unexpected because we've been doing this for so long. And as we continue to grow a lot, we're at a point now where other people make decisions in the company, not just me. And so I delegate to management, things like that. And we were asked if I was asked if we could hire new people. And so I gave the team autonomy to make those hiring decisions. I thought because our processes were so well documented that that would be our safety net. As long as I hired people that could read and follow directions, then our processes would protect the results. What I learned though was people are like water, where they follow the path of least resistance. And so though they followed the steps, they didn't understand the why. And so because they didn't understand the greater why, what happens before or after the steps they're working on, they didn't understand the value in looking for opportunities to make slight changes in the process, maybe do something a little bit different for somebody. And because of that, we had, a couple months where we started to see a difference in results. Um, Little things started to be missed. And I had to come back in to fulfillment for a while and realign the team. And so we went back through all of our documentation and made one tiny update. So I had all the team leads that have been with us for years and understand the process and understand the why, go back through and update all the tasks and add the why. So now when we open a task before the tactical, do step one, do step two, do step three, it says why. You are going to do the task below because it has the impact in this way. And so doing that has really better solidified the team's ability to delegate to people beneath them and hire other people and still maintain that quality control.
Mhm. That's interesting because it raises in me one question now. Uh, you have a team of people who work. So in random situation, you onboard the client, you say to them and explain to them that SEO is slow, and how are their expectations and energy goes during this time? Are they in any moments go way down, not believing that this is going to happen, thinking that they don't need that? Is there any way how you manage to keep them accountable, how to manage to keep them believing? Because you have results and this is
Mhm.
in place. But how are their feelings over the period of
But
waiting?
well, you kind of try to detect that in the beginning. And so if you can tell there's going to be some impatience, then it's not going to be a good campaign. And so
Hmm.
ideally, if there's any potential for them to become impatient, you just don't start. Now, every once in a while, they get through the filter, and a couple of months into it, they'll start asking where are the results, where are the results, where are the results. Usually, that's identifiable by the industry too, though, and so that's why I said we've kind of started to say no to marketers because even though we explain here's all the time frames and the reasons for patience, no matter how many times you set those expectations. With certain industries, they still follow up 6 months later and go, where are the results? And so you have to
Mm.
go, well, we're only 6 months into a 12-month campaign. So you try to filter that out before. Now, if you're good at that, then the rest of the clients, really people just want to know that there's things in progress in motion. And so we've become really good at touch points. And so an example is, after our onboarding call, 30 days later, we send a handwritten thank you card that says, thanks for the opportunity to increase your visibility. And so they just want to be touched. Most clients just
Mm.
want to know, okay, I'm paying Nick money. Is he doing something? And then we have a certain other thing like at 3 months where we send, we call it a 3 month SEO or your first quarter SEO birthday. And so we send this little branded little cupcake kind of thing. And then at 6 months we send another thing, and at 9 months we send another thing. And so what we try to do is, along the way we're sending them progress reports, and so they see the rankings moving, but we also want them to know that we're you know, they have an opportunity to communicate, that we're thinking about them, that things are in motion. And so as long as you proactively do those things, you don't have problems until the customer asks you. If the customer asks you, then it's kind of already too late. So you want to identify what the expectations the customer has, and then set those in advance proactively.
Love it. You're basing your company model on consistent follow-up. And moreover, you're not just following up in the way like, hey guys, the money you paid, it's valuable, but you're also showing them how this actually looks like and how the future path will look like. And what I want to ask you now is we were speaking before the recording that different platforms, in my perspective, operates differently. Out of context before the question is that my belief is if I post on Facebook, I post for the ecosystem of my friends. I don't so much rely what my followers gonna see, say, or do. But if I post something on Instagram or on YouTube, I kind of broadcasting it. I rely so much on gaining more people closer to me, like subscribers or followers. How do you see that? How do you see different messaging over the platforms? And from your expertise, should it be different or not? And give me a little bit of content on that.
Yeah, so every will be different, and I can give you clear examples for me, and then that's going to be different for other people in different markets too. So for me, LinkedIn's had a lot of success. I've grown a lot of visibility there. I get a lot of engagement there. But what's interesting is people will follow me on LinkedIn and then transition over to Facebook. And so LinkedIn is a B2B platform. And so people might follow you for your business advice there, but then they convert way more on Facebook, at least for me, because Facebook, you share a little bit more personal, intimate stories. And so we've talked a couple times about the value of sharing stories. And so people will relate to you as a human, and then that's when they convert. So they'll follow you for your advice, convert when they relate to you as a human. And so because Facebook is a more personal marketplace, then that's worked well for me. Now, as you were saying, we were chatting before we hit record, and I spent a lot of time investing in Instagram, and that has never worked for me. I mean, I spent probably 2 years A/B testing with an audio video team, doing all sorts of different types of videos and images. And the amount of intentional time spent there for the return is non-existent. But Instagram works amazing for other people. And so your audience is on different platforms. So I think it's important to focus on just one first, perfect one, understand the nuances and what's good or bad and the effectiveness of that platform. And nail that down before you transition to another. You don't have to be on all the platforms all the time. Like your goal is to, create an audience or monetize a certain platform. So perfect that one instead of diluting yourself across many. So yeah, it depends on which product is, and also your location in the world. So an example on LinkedIn for me is if I post between 6 and 7 a.m. Mountain Time, that is a massive difference of several thousand views versus if I post any other time of day. It could be dozens. So just the time of day can make a massive difference. And I don't have science behind why that window works so well for me. I have a guess. My guess is that for my audience is mostly in the US. My audience is mostly a business market. And so if I post at 7 a.m., then that's 9 a.m. on the East Coast. And so
Yeah.
people, I'm assuming, have got through traffic, are now at their desk, they're done with their morning routine. And most of us kind of grab our phone for a few minutes when we get to our desk. And so I think I'm catching people's visibility in that window. And then on the West Coast, it would be 6 a.m. And I think I'm catching people when they're just waking up. They're kind of looking at their phone when they're eating
Yeah.
breakfast, sitting in bed. And so that window's made a big difference for me. So, yeah, I think a lesson across all these questions, whether it's your market, whether it's your platform, whether it's your industry, is to give yourself the freedom and flexibility to A/B test different approaches on different platforms at different times, and don't feel obligated to do everything somebody else says that works well for them.
That's awesome. And for the very end, before we wrap it up, I would like to ask you, how do you see the future of SEO and digital marketing in the next years? And how can businesses prepare for those changes?
So this is probably the first time where I think there's actually been a significant shift, at least on the SEO side. Other platforms and types of marketing have had significant shifts, but I've always stuck to those fundamentals. But now with AI, I think that Google now has competition and where attention is going. There's some really great studies on two sites, sparktoro.com and then SEMrush has a good study too, where a lot of people have adopted AI, but Google is still way larger. The study was Google is 800% larger than ChatGPT. And
Well,
so the amount of queries that ChatGPT has in a year, Google has like in a day. It was something crazy. What was also interesting is, so ChatGPT still had a ton of users adopted, which is amazing, but Google is way larger. So there's a misconception that like all the eyeballs have moved, and
mm,
that's not true. The other thing that's interesting is out of that usage of ChatGPT, they identified that only 30% of those queries are commercial. And so what
mm,
that means is the other 70% is people asking ChatGPT to tell it a thing, to make it an image. It's not asking it commercial queries. So not only is the search volume lower on AI, but the commercial buyer intent is way lower on AI.
oh
And so
yeah,
what that says is the volume and the needs for commercial buyers is still on Google. Now, that being said, I think the shift will continue to move. And so I think that what the future is, I don't think Google's going anywhere. I don't think they're going to die. Uh, but I could see in the next couple of years that the adoption is now 50-50
mm,
because there's a difference in user experience with ChatGPT versus Google. So it's not that one is better or worse than another. It's just a different experience. And so with ChatGPT, usually you just want one thing, right? It's like you ask it a thing. And so if you have clarity on what you're asking, then you're probably going to go to ChatGPT. But if you need diversity or you want to look at multiple things, that's a different user experience. And so if you go to Google, now you can see, 10 different things. And so I think there's going to be a shift on user experience of, depending on what you're looking for. Just like, you know, um, eBay and Amazon. They're both big platforms. They're both e-commerce platforms, but you kind of go to one versus the other for different
yeah.
intent. And so I think it'll be kind of a similar thing. Google and ChatGPT. ChatGPT will still continue to increase in adoption. Google will probably lose some user base, but I don't think either of them are going to totally consume the other.
Mm. Very interesting. Well, Damon, thank you so much for this conversation, and I really appreciate you sparing your time to come to today's show. I really enjoyed, and besides the book, which I'll definitely put in a description for all the users who are watching us at the video platform or listening to audio platforms, is there anything else how people can find you, approach you, or consume part of your stuff so that they can come closer and see if you are of help for them?
Yeah, really simple, damonburton.com. Whether you're looking for the book, you can download it for free there. If you want to engage and see if SEO makes sense, there's a qualification form on there, and you can find all my social media channels on there as well.
Thank you so much. And guys, as you heard, I will put all these links in the description of the video platforms and as well of the audio platforms. Damon, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for your wisdom. I really enjoyed. If you made it that far with the episode with Damon Burton, I have a gift for you. But before that, I want to tell you that you maybe realized next. The visibility isn't solely vanity metric. It might be your leverage. And in the world shouting louder than ever, it's the quietest operators slowly and silently. It's the quietest operators who often run the game. Because if we just for a second see who are the best performing clients of a Damon Burton, we would understand a couple of things. They're not randomly guessing. They have a strong vision for future. And it's not all about hype. It's about proven strategy with work. Principles which will never change. And Damon himself, he do not chase trends. He builds on the solid infrastructure and foundation. And maybe that's not the real takedown today. That trust and traffic are both earned. And that AI con mimics a lot of trends. But one thing is sure. It can't replace experience, precision, or presence. So if this conversation shifts the way you see digital game, hit the subscribe button. Not because of me, not because I need more of subscribers on my list, but because that's the one and first sign to you show me that you like this show. And if you go even further and give me more signals by liking or commenting this episode, me and my team, we will do everything to bring a guests on this show whom you might be interesting to hear about and learn from them. And here is the thing. I mentioned at the end that you can get a small game. Comment below SEO and I will send you a private Loom video between me and Damon. After we shut down the camera, I came up with two great questions. He wasn't lazy, he took his phone and recorded a private Loom video to me. I'm going to share it with all of you who comment below SEO. Thank you for watching. My name is NGrS&x and I will see you in the next one.